Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Center Stage at HUBweek. My name is Brendan Ryan, and I am the Executive Director of HUBweek. I am really excited for what we have coming up this afternoon. I've been working on HUBweek for almost 4 years now, and one of the things I have seen and learned in this job is that our city and our region is much more dynamic, much more forward-looking than we give ourselves credit for. And my way of expressing that has been that it's not that Boston is slow to change, it's that we can be very slow to recognize when we've changed and how we've changed. But you see this all around you. If you walk outside, that's really what you feel at HUBweek, is that we have changed in just the most wonderful way. We are full of people who don't remember the big dig. They only know the Greenway. They are used to the Red Sox winning World Series. They don't have any of that kind of pre-04, which is about both the Greenway and the Red Sox mentality. It's a really wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to see our city continue to do what we've always done, which is to reinvent ourselves, to welcome in new generations of Americans and residents, and see them contribute to what we have and bring the best of who they are and what they have to our city and make us stronger for it. And one thing we are seeing across the city right now is this amazing transformation of our civic leadership in a new generation of leaders who are taking charge and claiming the city for themselves and doing it as representatives of that city that we've become. And it's powerful. It's really inspiring. It's incredibly hard. I worked in government and politics for a long time before I worked at HUBweek. I tend to think anybody who runs for political office is wonderful and insane. It is a thankless, unbelievably challenging thing to do on the best day, but we are so very lucky that good people do it, and the better for it when good people do it. And so today, we have one of those amazing people who decided to put herself out there and run for city council at a time when nobody thought that it was her turn to run for city council. But she ran, and she won, and she topped the ballot, and she ran again, and she has been a hugely effective city councilor for the city of Boston. And this year, she decided that it was her time to run for the U.S. Congress, and the people of Boston agreed. And a few weeks ago, she won a decisive victory in the Democratic primary to be the Democratic nominee for the 7th District of Massachusetts. And I hope I'm not stealing some of her story, but as she was talking about backstage, she worked in what was the 8th District at the time for Congressman Joe Kennedy, and that's where she got her start in politics. And what a wonderful symbolism and what a wonderful symbol of who we are as a city and our ability to reinvigorate ourselves and come full circle, that she, as of January, will serve as the congressperson from the 7th District of Massachusetts. It is my honor and privilege to introduce City Councilor Ayanna Pressley.
Hello. Well, thank all of you for being here, and thank you, Brendan, for that warm introduction, and all of you for the warm welcome. I'm so honored to be here with you to share this stage with so many inspirational leaders, including my fellow sister in service and Democratic nominee for District Attorney Rachel Rollins, who I know spoke earlier this week. Now, I do have to concede, and if my team were here, they would tell you, I'm really not much of a tech whiz. They had to pry my BlackBerry out of my hands. And I don't know anything about Fortnite. I think the last game I played was Pac-Man. But I have been told once or twice that I am a little disruptive. And you know what I know? All of you are disruptive too, in your own way and in your own right, as civic artisans, as values engineers, as social architects, as innovators and coalition builders who are making our city and our Commonwealth smarter and more resilient and more inclusive. And what you are proving here today by participating in HUBweek is that you are also civil servants who care about our communities and our democracy. In the postmortem analysis of our primary victory of September 4th, pundits and fellow colleagues in government have often inquired, what is the secret sauce? How did you pull this thing off? And I wish I had some really profound analysis to offer. The truth of the matter is, when you meet people in community where they are, when you engage them in democracy and treat them as an equal partner, as an equal innovator, as an equal disruptor, when you listen to them and are led by their stories and by their ideas, when you demonstrate to people that you give a damn about them, then they give a damn about our democracy. It is hard to think that this approach is considered to be disruptive and audacious, that putting people at the center of policy, that the work of being an activist leader, not taking a single dime from corporate PACs, that it would be audacious and disruptive to run a campaign in such a way. Now, we here in Massachusetts, with our campaign and those like it throughout our country, are quite literally ushering in a new paradigm. The polls had us down by 13 points. I knew we had a path to victory. I knew what I could see and feel out there in community every day, on people's doorsteps, in their living rooms, around their kitchen tables, at bodegas and church basements. 13 points, though. But I knew they were undersampling the electorate that we were growing. And I also knew that polls would never capture transformation. And we were in the midst of something transformational. So I hope that is the greater takeaway of our campaign. Two things: that it was less a referendum and a rejection of hate, but more a mandate for hope. And it's crazy to think that that's something disruptive. But what we challenge the electorate to do is to not put our hope, our aspiration, our vision, our innovation on a shelf, no matter how sobering the political landscape. And for many people who had been in a fetal position since 2016, we restored their hope, their trust, their belief in government. And for those who had never been actively engaged and a hand of partnership extended to them, they felt seen and heard for the first time. We built a deep and diverse grassroots coalition of volunteers and social change agents, many of whom were young people, millennials. The 7th Congressional District has the largest concentration of millennials of any congressional district in the country, given the number of assets of higher education institutions in the district. And people said, well, sure, Ayanna might motivate immigrants, people of color, millennials, all of the constituencies that pundits consider to be unlikely to turn out. Didn't assume that they would be primary voters. But I believe that millennials are cause-driven and mission-motivated. They're just not party-affiliated. And that is our fault because of gatekeepers who have excluded them and not given them an equal partnership or seat at the table of democracy. So although our campaign was considered to be disruptive and my candidacy disruptive, just like in the tech space, just like in the sciences, just like in the arts, I'd like to think that that disruption will lead to greater innovation for our democracy and ultimately in our policy making. So I will end here and simply just urge all of you to not be afraid of being a little disruptive, to help to strengthen our democracy, to build our future, one that we all feel included in and can feel proud to be a part of. Brick by brick, one disruptive act at a time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and for your words, Ayanna. My name is Linda Henry. I am the managing director of the Boston Globe and a co-founder of HUBweek, and so I'm thrilled to be here today. And you and I get to talk for a few minutes, and then we're going to open it up to the crowd for questions when you have them. So I wanted to point out how you said that you weren't much of a technical person. And HUBweek explores the intersection of art, science, and technology. But you are an artist. Yes. And you are an artist in that you are a fantastic singer, and you were really strongly pursuing your singing when you were in high school.
That's true. I'm curious as to who characterized me as the fantastic singer. Certainly not my husband, who hears me only in the shower. But I grew up, many people, because I have been involved in electoral politics and government and public service for my whole life. I've been a Democrat since I was in utero. I did my first protest march for tenants' rights as my mother carried me at the age of 3 months old. My very first campaign at the age of 10 years old to help elect Harold Washington as the first African-American mayor in the city of Chicago. So many things since I went sort of a traditional trajectory in my development in building me up to build my community up. Many people don't know that the origins of my leadership development really began in church. And so as the granddaughter of a Baptist preacher, and may he rest in power, my grandfather, who pastored a storefront church on the south side of Chicago for 60 plus years, passed away several days ago. But my leadership training really began in church. And it's also where I found not only my voice to speak out, but my singing. I had a lot of solos in the choir. They all thought it was because I was the pastor's grandkid. Untrue. I earned every single one of those solos. And then I did briefly sort of dabble in professional singing, doing voiceover work and commercials and things like that, and pursued it in earnest until I was about the age of 15, and then politics and government and public service won out. However, I continue to be someone who's incredibly passionate about the role of arts and culture and creativity and the creative economy, and the intersectionality of all that we're discussing here today: politics, innovation, science.
We were talking backstage about how I had the chance to interview Ann McKee yesterday, who's a neuropathologist, and her training as a visual artist really helped her in her work at studying brains, and she's been really at the forefront of CTE and changing sort of our country's understanding of head trauma. And for you, your childhood, your childhood spent as a musician has really helped you in your professional career today, and your ability to connect with an audience, your ability to speak in front of a room, and just sort of this presence that it gave you. So I just think that there's a wonderful, you 100% connect with HUBweek, and especially in your background as an artist, and how that's supporting you and enabling you.
Sure, I'd like to think so. In sort of developing emotional intelligence, entering a space, and sort of those nonverbal cues about what folks are in a headspace, and what kind of headspace they're in and what they're ready to receive. And, I also love the humanities. And so Dr. Maya Angelou once said that there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story. And this is what I find is so important about the arts, about singing, about the humanities. It's about storytelling. And that has certainly informed how I govern. It's why I put people at the center of the work that I do. I may not remember the names of every person I meet, but their individual, unique, and authentic song. It is their personal stories that I carry with me that directly shapes and informs the issues that I champion and how I go about tackling really complex systemic issues.
You talked about your mom, and your mom has been such an incredible presence in your world.
Yes.
And you have a tradition of raising your hand. What Brendan was referencing is that you see something and you raise your hand for it. And before you were even able to do that, your mom did that for you. Can you talk about some of the ways that your mom started raising your hand and how you're following in that tradition?
Sure. Okay, so try to do 3 quick examples. So when I was 16 years old, and again, in many ways, my path was very traditional, even if my personal life circumstances were very untraditional, being raised by a single parent. My father, who is a brilliant man and today a published author, but he battled an opioid addiction for a number of years and was in and out of the criminal justice system for some 14 years. And so that was very destabilizing to our household. So my mother, may she rest in power, remains my shero, the woman who gave me my roots and my wings. And so, as I said, in many ways, even though my life circumstances were challenging, I had a more traditional trajectory in terms of public service. So I was class president, and I was a competitive debater, and I was student government president. And so my mother, in keeping with that, had, unbeknownst to me, applied for me to participate in a summer program at Stanford University called Junior Statesman of America. And because I didn't know she had applied on my behalf, I'm sure this is illegal. I mean, she filled out everything. I wrote the essay, everything. I'm just telling the whole truth. I mean, it was years ago. I'm 44, so it's okay. But I was rejected. And my mother called them up and told them what a mistake they had made, that they were going to want to say one day that I was an alumnus of this program. And I think she just wore the admissions officer down after about an hour and a half. And the best part of that is that I went on to become the valedictorian of that program. And so that is one such example of my mother's fierce advocacy on my behalf and raising my hand. And then the final example that I would give you is my mother worked many jobs as she struggled to make ends meet. And one of them was as in corporate America very briefly. And she was in her 50s. She had worked in patent law for a long time, and she was applying for jobs that she was perfectly capable of doing, but she was experiencing ageism. And she had taken PowerPoint classes and all these sorts of things to be more competitive in the job market, but she couldn't land. And so she was in her 50s, and she sent me her resume, and she said, I just need some advice. Could you look it over and let me know what I should do? I just don't know why I'm getting so many no's. And I looked at it, and at the top of the resume, it said, Ayanna Pressley's mother. And I think I was an aide to the senator at that point. And I said, well, Mommy, here's your problem. I mean, this seems eccentric, and odd. You cannot put this at the top of your resume. And she said, you can change whatever else you want, but that stays because you are my greatest and proudest achievement. So I hope that gives you a sense as to the soil with which I was rooted, and just how fortunate and blessed I was to have someone who fought so fiercely to make sure that our zip code would not define my destiny, and that I would never be deprived or denied any opportunity.
Your mom, I'm sorry I never got a chance to meet her, because I've heard so many stories. In preparing for today, I got to talk to several people, and whenever people talk about you, they talk about your mom. Not only the photo that you put in front of you at every council meeting, but just how your mom would put on her hat and sit in those meetings, and just how she was such a presence for you, and she became a presence of, she adopted Boston.
She gave me so much, my spirit of activism and these hips too. She could have kept that. But.
And so talking about the role of your mom and you to today, where women are really at the vanguard of voter enthusiasm and energy right now, what do you attribute that to? What don't you attribute it to?
Yes, I struggle with this question because it is very tempting, given the number of women that are running and winning, to talk about a wave. And I find that as a woman and as a woman of color, that when we do have electoral victories, we are often characterized as a fluke or an anomaly. And if we're not characterized as a fluke and an anomaly, then we are characterized as a trend and a fad. I experienced it when I was elected to the Boston City Council in 2009, becoming the first woman of color elected to that body in its 100-year history. And it was in the wake of Barack Obama's election. And so people said, well, this is about, she's sort of riding the coattails of this new post-racial America and Obama's win. And now we're electing coalition builders. And now they're talking about a blue wave and a women's wave and a black girl magic wave. What I would say is that either of these descriptors, either of these framers, I think give short shrift to the leadership choices we made, to the sweat equity that we expended, to the coalitions that we built, quite literally one person at a time. So I think what is happening is that more women are running and more women are feeling emboldened to stand authentically in their power and from their lived experience, which I think previously there was not an audience for. There wasn't an electorate for. I remember running for the city council the first time, and I was single and unmarried and childless. And so many women would say, I'm not sure that you can relate to my struggles. And I said, oh, no, I can definitely relate. I'm a caregiver to my mother battling a chronic and terminal illness, which is the case for many women. I don't have anyone to carry me on their health insurance. I am paying a mortgage alone. And so, yes, but I found the electorate had adopted a very single narrative about their female candidates. And they wanted them to be straight, and they wanted them to be married, and they wanted them to have children. And so finally, I just worked out this little riff where because they would say, well, you're not from Boston. It's a very tribal, parochial place. You don't go to Boston public schools. You don't have children in Boston public schools. And so, as if I would feel any less of an obligation to children because I don't have a child in that school system. And so I just said, okay, so this is what we're going to work out. I'm going to be married to my job, and you can be my baby. So are we good now? So I'm saying that just to bring some levity into the space, but I do think that we're at a point now where we are celebrating and embracing a diversity of narratives of what it means to be woman and what leadership looks like. And that's important because no group is a monolith. And we need women of every age, of every walk of life, of every gender identity, women that have children and women that are childless. Because ultimately the issues that are championed will be more robust and more fully informed, and the policies that are developed will be more reflective of the totality of experiences of being a woman. And that has not been the case previously. So I think right now what we're lifting up is the value of leadership parity, is the value of cognitive diversity, a diversity of perspective, opinion, and thought, and a lifting up and a valuing of lived experience. And so I'm celebrating that. But I don't know that I'm going to call it a wave. If there is a wave, it's not one that we're riding, it's one we created.
I like that perspective. I want to talk for a minute about the moment that you won. Jessie Mermel, who was on stage here yesterday, she captured it in a video, and this video went viral. And you had talked about before, you had referenced that polls were saying that you were not going to win. You were going against an incumbent, and that's hard. That's really hard to do. This is something that you raised your hand for, knowing that it was going to be hard. And you got the news. What was that moment?
Anyone seen the video? Okay, so you know what the moment was. So Jessie Mermel, president of the Alliance for Business Leadership, a dear friend of mine, she had volunteered in the final stages of the campaign, so she was in the holding room and was videotaping that, and or recording that rather. And
She was recording it to send to her parents.
okay. And here's a funny story. I mean, this is real inside baseball. So by the time we came off the stage, that video had already gone viral. I mean, millions of people had seen this video very quickly. And I said, Jessie, why did you do that? And she said, well, I thought I would post it and a couple of political nerds might watch it or retweet it. So thank you, Jessie. But I was awestruck. I knew that we had a path to victory, but I was also keenly aware of the real barriers in our way. We don't primary Democrats in a dark blue state or commonwealth like Massachusetts, and certainly not in a dark blue district like the Massachusetts 7th. And so I anticipated this journey would be uphill and lonely and bruising, and I was prepared for it. You said that I keep raising my hand. I don't consider myself to be brave. I think I've raised my hand over and over again because I've been compelled and driven by the work. I was aware in the recesses of my mind when I was elected to the council, or when I was running for the council, that if I won, I'd be the first woman of color elected. I was aware in the recesses of my mind that if I won this seat, that I'd be the first person of color to represent Massachusetts in our congressional delegation. But neither of those were the motivators behind my run. I was never running to make history, only to make change, only to make a difference, only to address systemic inequalities and disparities that have only worsened in the Massachusetts 7th, the most diverse and unequal district in our delegation and perhaps in the country. So in that moment, I felt humbled, awestruck, and then I immediately sat with the awesome responsibility of the work that would lie ahead to bring about this change. And I just want to, again, just give some insight. Moments before they came in to tell me that, I thought we had lost. And I had made the decision that I was only going to write one speech, and it was going to have to work either way. And so I was readying myself because I knew we had engaged so many new people in the process. 3 quick examples. We had 14-year-olds that were door knocking every day, sometimes 8 hours a day. And you know the kind of summer we had. Sometimes it was 100 degrees. And they were knocking 8 hours a day, 14-year-olds. We had elders in our community, 78 years old to 82, that were phone banking and calling their fellow sorority sisters and church parishioners. We had 250 incarcerated men behind the wall of MCI Norfolk that had a debate watch party, endorsed our candidacy, and then organized 3 family members on the outside, each of them, to go to the polls. So win or lose, I was sitting with what we had accomplished and the hope that we had restored, or the hope that we had given people for the first time, and I wanted to make sure that I could keep it. And so I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity now to write policy, to govern in coalition, in community, to keep that trust that we restored for so many, or for many more that we gave for the first time.
I have 30 more questions for you,
Okay.
But I promised to turn it over, so if we could have a mic runner that right here, help us out, right there.
So thank you, Congresswoman-elect. I won't call you Councilor Pressley. Congratulations.
Thank you.
A quick comment. My millennial son's biggest regret during the recent election was that he was not in the district where he could vote for you.
Oh.
And I shared that with him. So,
Well, give him my regards.
I will. We're in the 8th, so even though we followed you in the city for a while. I have a question. And clearly from my question, you will notice the bias that is about to spill over. Many people are very satisfied that we have rock no boats, middle of the road, current governor. And the person running for governor on the Democratic ticket is Jay Gonzalez. And I always wonder, how can people be satisfied just living with not thinking about a vision or not talking about what could be disruptive and what we need in Massachusetts to address some significant issues that we have. What would you, as a disruptor, say to those people who say, well, we're okay, we're happy with middle of the road Charlie Baker?
Okay. Nice little softball question there.
There's no danger in it.
Okay, well, first I just want to, let me just talk about my race for a moment. Because you could argue that similar dynamic, I respect Mike Capuano tremendously. He has been a dedicated public servant to this district for a generation, for 20 years. And many people, when I said that I wanted to run, would say, he's got a great voting record. And I was not debating or disputing that. I just felt that a reliable vote was not enough, given what these times require, which I believe is bold, visionary, activist leadership. If you look at the ACA, ultimately that was not spared for the conviction of lawmakers. It was for the courage of individuals and families who organized and mobilized on the front lines and demanded that lawmakers see the humanity in them and that lives were quite literally hanging in the balance. I ran because I wanted to bring bold, activist, visionary leadership that required or that demonstrated movement and coalition building. Because the silver lining that I see in this current climate is that our organizing silos are breaking down. And some might think it's hokey, but I believe people are finally getting that we are one human family, that our destinies are tied, and the same people that organized with me at the Women's March, were at the State House for criminal justice reform, were at City Hall Plaza for immigrants' rights, our human rights, rejecting a zero-tolerance policy, are the same people in 30 minutes that will stand with me in support of Yes on 3 to protect trans rights and accommodations. So I do believe this is the time to demand more of all our elected leaders, but also of our civic leaders. We have to, in my biased view, resist and affront these cruel, draconian, and short-sighted policies that are coming out of this White House every day, and that's by organizing. But it's not enough to just resist and to talk about what we're against. We have to lift up, fight for, and organize what we are for. And so when people say that folks don't vote because they're ignorant, apathetic, uneducated, and just don't know any better, that's not true. People don't vote because of broken hearts and broken promises, because of broken systems. We have to restore their faith, their trust, and their hope in government. And for me, that is about being visionary. To your point about Governor Baker, he ran as, I think he's been successful because he is a moderate, he characterizes himself as a moderate Republican. He is likable, and he ran as a manager. I think politicians manage what is, and leaders take you somewhere. And what we need right now is visionary, aspirational leadership to disrupt the status quo and to improve and to address these disparate outcomes across every issue, from education to public health to our transit system. So I think, as tempting as it is to be divided, and as much as they would like for us to, those folks in the White House, as tempting as it is to play small, now is the time to be even more bold. And I plan on doing that from the Massachusetts 7th. Need I remind you all, this was a seat held by John F. Kennedy. It will never be represented by a Republican, so I can be as bold, unencumbered, unrestrained, and innovative as I want to be. And if we can't, and if we can't do that from the Massachusetts 7th, then we can't do that anywhere. And please do support Jay Gonzalez. I'm campaigning hard for the Democratic ticket. Corner office all the way down.
Next question, Ellen Clegg is the next question.
I know you.
Hi. So please talk about your vision for once. Let's hypothetically assume you're elected to Congress. What's next? Hypothetically.
I like that. Be cautious. Yeah. I'm certainly not being complacent. I haven't taken a nap in 9 months.
This is the first time you've sat down.
It's the first time I've sat down. Truth of the matter, I think, if our primary victory is codified on November 6th, and I do become the congresswoman, I don't have a Republican challenger, so if I do become the congresswoman for the Massachusetts 7th, I think the first order of business is having a conversation with the party about the heart and the guts of this party and who we are. Everyone keeps asking me, who will I support for leader? I don't know about you, but I would not hire a principal for a school if I was unclear about the mission and the value statement of the school. So in the school of democracy and within the Democratic Party, I think we have been presenting false choices about who we are. I don't think this is a debate about whether or not we are the party of working class, white folk and everyone else, or of jobs in the economy and criminal justice reform. That is a false choice. So what I'm calling for and what I'm working for is a return foundationally to who we espouse we are as Democrats. And that is to lift up workers' rights and the rights of women and immigrants and the LGBTQIA community. I can sit at the table and negotiate with anyone in the name of progress, but these are things I'm unwilling to compromise on. So to me, first order of business before we elect a leader is to have an honest conversation about the direction of this party, the heart, the soul, and the guts of this party. I'm very proud, and we're doing the analysis right now of our data, but the top lines are very encouraging. We expanded this electorate. So for those that saw my candidacy in our campaign as disruptive or even traitorous, after 2016, we were given a mandate, and that was to ignite the electorate and to grow it. But everyone made that about the buildup for 2020. This is about so much more than one election cycle. I believe this is a fight for the soul of the party and the future of our democracy, which requires us to engage as many people as possible, not just so they'll go to the ballot box and vote, but so that they will govern with us in coalition to realize progress. We have to, in this new world dichotomy, resist and progress. So first order of business for me, other than building an inclusive transition team, an inclusive and talented and dedicated congressional staff, is to have a conversation with the party about the direction of the party. If we want people to vote, we have to give them a reason to.
And on that note, I completely went over time, but this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you all for being part of it. Thank you, Ayanna.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank all of you.